Hello there, I'm Carlos, and this is Kingdoms, where all your nerdy dreams come true. Today, we have the privilege of starting off our first podcast, the Kingdoms Cast, and I have two lovely co-hosts, Jason Rivera and John Strong. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
How's it going?
We are just going to jump into our topic today. We are Commander players by and large, and that's what we love and that's what we do. Those of you that haven't heard, Voja, Jaws of the Conclave, is the scariest commander that has ever been printed. And that is because it has elves, wolves, and draws you cards, right? But really, everyone's afraid of one little tiny part on Voja, and it's Ward 3. Which is sort of the funniest thing, that of all the text, the Ward 3 is the scary part.
Carlos, we first met and started playing Commander together at a little game store in Provo, Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And around that time, this is what, 13 years ago? Yeah, sorry. Around that time, Earl the Miststalker was a thing.
That's right.
Do you remember Earl?
I do remember Earl.
Also, 5-mana Naya commander villain Dior of the time. So, literally had hexproof and was a Voltron deck that just destroyed people. And I think there's a good chance that if anyone that's listening, there's a good chance they're probably looking up what Earl the Miststalker does right now, because it's completely irrelevant.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I really don't think that the issue with Voja is that it's untargetable, or like it's the fact that they can't target it when they need to, right? And so like it, in some ways, it would be better if Voja was hexproof, because I think a lot of the options that people have would be off the table, typically, to take care of a creature. And so they'd have to, find some kind of wrath spell or something else to take care of it. It does seem to be breaking people's hearts and minds.
I'm actually going to play devil's advocate for this. Ural is nothing like Voja, because you have to stack a bunch of enchantment auras on it in order to get anything out of it. Otherwise, it's just chumped by 1/1s all day. Voja inherently has vigilance and trample, and so it's going to run over whatever you put in front of it, right? It's going to get these +1/+1 encounters. It's going to draw a bunch of cards because you have wolves, at least one card, right? Ural, you have to have put so much investment into it in order for the payoffs to start coming out. And yeah, like, you have lifelink and trample on an enchantment, but Voja already has trample inherently, and then it can block. It's the same thing when I'm playing Indominus Rex, and I have indestructible and hexproof and trample and vigilance and flying and all of these things. It's just hard to deal with. The other argument that I've seen online is that it should be like a +X until end of turn. Would have been a little bit more fair, because if you can pop some of the elves that don't have ward, then it's smaller the following turn. But no, the counters stick around, and the counters on all of your creatures, so now all of your elves are problems.
The argument is Magic is making cards, or Wizards is making cards that are too powerful, and the statement was, this is a symptom of that, right? And then others were saying, no, it's not that bad, just remove it, right? And so those are the two sort of main, camps, and I do tend to lean in the secondary camp, where we should be playing enough cards that we can take care of this. Is that if you're doing your rule 0 correctly, there's not really an issue with this. And so that's my whole hot take on this subject, is both people are wrong, both camps are wrong if you're doing your rule 0 discussion correctly, which we'll come to a little bit later. With that, we wanted to talk a little bit today about power levels, and Voja is a great example of one that sort of skirts the line and can make things messy. When we first started playing Commander, you really didn't have power levels, actually. It was a new enough format that you would put together a Commander deck. Just having a deck was cool enough in a way. Like not even everybody had a Commander deck. So like the fact that you had one and everyone was there with a Commander deck was like good enough to put a game together. And there wasn't really a discussion of like, is my deck good enough to play with your deck, right? It was just, oh, we have enough people to play Commander. Let's, jam our decks together.
Yep, the good old days.
Yeah, I think your emotional responses were about what deck they're playing, right? Versus versus what kind of power level. Like somebody sat down with the original Div Mizzet, like, I'm sorry, like you're a threat. Like you have curiosity. Stop saying you don't. I'm just gonna play this entire game as though you're just gonna play it and win. Like with Voja, for instance, it told you when you read the card that it's an Elves and Wolves card. And Elves and Wolves typo is, I don't know, not necessarily something that screams high power, big threat, but just the power level of the individual commander makes it that way. And so I don't know. It's interesting how that works with something like power level.
After that point, I guess as time went on, I think the easiest was just, how powerful is your deck on a scale of 1 through 10. There were some different, and still are today, some different versions of power levels. Rachel Weeks has her Lasagna tier, which is more of a sort of an experience-based question. Almost a rule 0 / power level discussion, just been inherently in what it is. Have you guys done anything with Play ADH? Were you a part of that at all when the pandemic hit?
No. But it's really informed a lot of the command zones.
And so that's sort of where we're at today. I think at least our group, we still sort of use our own version of a low, mid, high CDH tiers for power level. But what do you guys think is the biggest difference between a Rule 0 discussion and a power level discussion?
I think that they are similar in some ways, with Rule 0 being we don't want certain power levels in our pod, in this game at least, or certain cards are disallowed. For Kingdoms players, we don't play Thassa's Oracle, just because, it's our Rule 0, right? We have a Rule 0 in KingdomsTV, and so it's not because Thassa's is a bad card necessarily, but it's just kind of, for our channel purposes, an unfun way to win. Like, all of a sudden, boom, you've Thassa's Oracled and the game is done. What kind of show would that be, unless it's CEDH, as opposed to power level, where you're saying, okay, this is like a commander precon, or this is a little bit of upgrades in a commander precon, or this is my custom $5,000 sliver deck. It's like there's a lot of different ranges and different ways to gauge power level, and there's also a lot of different ways you can aim power level by Rule 0ing things.
Is it a little bit about like your session 0 of a D&D campaign, right? So your power level is akin to like, how many magic items are we talking here? Are we going, are we going to keep track of food and ammunition, or are we going to play like normal people where those things are just magic and you never run out of arrows? Versus like, that to me is like power level discussion. Rule 0 is just sitting down with the group and saying, hey, we're going to be the good guys in this adventuring party. We don't want to have the conflict of like somebody showing up to a D&D campaign and saying, hey, my secret objective is to kill all of the other players at the table. Right? Yeah. Like, that's just not a gameplay experience that we're there for, unless you are, in which case, like, that's pretty sweet. if everyone's kind of on board with that experience. And like I think that rule zero is helpful when you're getting into like you're bringing a disparate group of people together, and trying to have a specific type of experience. Power level, like you said, Carlos, for the most part is, people think all their decks are sevens, and I think a lot of it is about how you sit down and play, and just the experience that you want to have. And that's where kind of the lasagna thing comes in, and I think that's been my favorite way to look at it. Is you're bringing this dish to share with the table, and this dish is this combo deck. That's a thing that I'm sharing with the table, and I want to see how everyone interacts with it. I want to see how all of these things work, and I want you to experience it. And I'd like it to be a fun experience to have at least once, and then I'll put it back in the box.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Rule Zero is it really is like, this is a multiplayer game, and so you do have to ask more questions than just I want to win, right? Regular Magic, the only goal, I mean, you're having fun, which is the standard. Like, you're playing games to have fun, like in life, right? Or to be to have entertainment, or to be a diversion, right? But in regular Magic, your only goal, like in the game side of things, is to win. But with Commander, there are or should be other goals. And if not, if you do want just that regular Magic experience in Commander, that's what CDH is for. And that's why, sort of bottom line for this whole episode, my overall thoughts are that power level discussion and power levels are so important because they help you determine what you're trying to get out of your experience. We're all coming to play this game together. Rule Zero does also include commanders that are maybe outside of the ban list, or sometimes somebody wants to play a planeswalker as their commander or something like that. That would be a Rule Zero where you would allow them, if you can all come together at the sort of the same level, everyone's trying as hard as they can at that level, and whoever wins, then it's a lot more enjoyable than sort of holding yourself back or stomping somebody because you're just completely in a different realm of tools available to you than they. And that's the thing too, that for most of us, we're all grown people, and we have the ability to play the best cards and best deck. So when you lose to somebody that pub stomps you, as they call it, it's not that I couldn't have fought against you. It's that we chose ideally to have maybe a lower power experience, and so that's where the feel bad's coming for me. When I very rarely feel bad when I play Commander, but I do at times when the Rule Zero / power level conversation has been either ignored or subverted, because then it makes me feel like I did something wrong when they actually were the ones that messed up.
I mean, I think you're inviting an opportunity to miscommunicate. The more communication that you're asking the group to have. So, like, I know we had an experience. I can't remember what decks it was for, but we built mid power, and I think myself, you, and my brother Jason, one of us interpreted the power level conversation to mean no fast mana. Another person said no tutors. Another person said no infinite combos. Just the miscommunication is there.
Summing it up, Rule Zero is kind of like special rules outside of what is set by the rules committee. Power level is coming together to make sure that everyone is having a similar experience. CEDH, you're trying to win on turns 0, 1, and 2, maybe at the latest.
I play a lot of CEDH. I listen to a lot of CEDH. The typical tournament average is between turn 5 and turn 6 for CEDH.
But if you can get away with it, you would try to win on turns 0, 1, and 2.
You are presenting the opportunity to win at turn 3.
So you're trying to get there and build and stop each other within those first vital turns. But then where a mid-power game, everybody wants to do their thing. Like the elves players wants to play all their elves and, elf ball out. And then the blue player just wants to bounce people's stuff. And then the elf player rebuilds. And then the third player is like group hug, and they're just trying to give everyone all the cards and all of the lands. And so everyone gets to do their thing, and like eventually the game comes to a head.
Yeah, that's a good point too, with the timing of like how many turns it takes and things like that, because most of the time I'm trying to make it so that my deck can win as fast as possible within the bounds that I've set it. I want it to win when it does its thing. And for a CDH deck, when it does its thing, that could be first turn, where I get a bunch of quick mana and you play Godo out, and in your first turn, you get the sweet hand and you win, right? Like, that's the goal of the deck, is to win in this specific way with this one equipment as fast as possible. And then I have an Arcades wall deck that just the whole goal of the deck is to make sure there's no combos in the deck. I'm winning an aggro in Commander with Bant with walls, right? Legitimately, like, subverting as many expectations as I can. Certain decks can only win at certain speeds, right? Like my Arcades deck literally can't win first turn. Like, it's impossible. So there's fast mana, tutors, free spells, in your overall like average card cost. These are some of the things that can add to and take away from the overall power level, just in the sense of like what the cards are and what they do.
For sure. I remember I built my Kutzel deck, and that did air, and I ramped the fastest that I've ever ramped before. I mean, I think I had 7 or 8 mana on turn 3. Everybody was freaking out at me, because, like, what is he going to do with this mana? I didn't have any tutors to get any spells. I didn't have, actually, haymakers in the deck, because, deck building is a thing. And so, who needs win cons, right? So no, I could have made that into like a really good, powerful, high power deck, and I failed because I didn't have the payoffs. And so if you combine fast mana, tutors, and free spells, that's gonna become your borderline EDH decks. I mean, you have all of your really fast mana rocks, card draw, answers and responses to everything. Then you have your tutors to make your win con much more reliable. Godo himself is a tutor. I mean, so that just takes care of that part. If you have the fast mana, and then you have like the deflecting spot to back him up, you're gonna win on first turn, right?
To your point, like when you have a commander that asks such a pointed question, do you have an answer? And I think there's non-CDH decks, there's high-powered decks, that ask similar questions. Again, Voja asks a question, right? Do you have a way to interact with this? Because, honestly, the other 99 cards could be draft commons. Like, this commander is so powerful, if left unchecked, it's going to win the game. Do you have it? And so the question really comes down to, was it built to, get the commander out on turn 3? Was it built to, have free interaction to protect it? Or, just loads and loads of protection? Is the average card cost so low that I've got a massive built-out board and my commander has haste when I play it on turn 5, and it's just going to be insurmountable,
That sounds like you're talking about Indominus Rex.
Yeah, stop doing that. I think the question is cool, right? Like, there was the first time we played the Jurassic Park game, there was a visceral feeling that was reminiscent of like watching Jurassic Park, of not like of hearing, the raptors in the kitchen, of just like, oh my gosh, this thing is like, it's going to kill me across 6 turns, or in 3 turns of, just hitting me. But like, I got nothing. I have no answers. I am going to hide and watch the ladles move. And that is all I've got. And that's a really cool experience a couple times. Uh, if we're playing in a play group all the time, like I got to come loaded for bear, right? I've got to be prepared. I got to get my farewells and, go fish out my, what was it, hallowed burial from Shadowmoor to put it on the bottom of your library. I got to try and do something.
I was thinking of things too to take care of it. Remember the storm, that Scourge card, the storm one that makes them sack an attacking creature?
Wing shards.
Yes, I used to love that card, and I was like, I have a reason to play this now just for Jason.
Indominus Rex has the fast mana. I mean, I can get him out on turn 2 with the right hand. I have a couple of tutors in there, Vampiric and Demonic tutors. And then I have like Force of Will, Force of Negation. That's the closest thing to CEDH that I have. But the catch is Indominus Rex is a Voltron commander. I have to hit you for 21 commander damage. Otherwise, I'm dead. I think it's a very fair high power deck because if somebody can go wide, they'll kill me. And I have like one answer to that in the entire deck. Constant Mist, the buyback fog. So, or if you just infinite combo on me and I'm one hit away from killing you, I can't stop it. Like, it's a fair high power deck, in my opinion. Hard to deal with, yes. Scary, yes. But you can easily remove the player. So I guess Voja comes down to like removing the player.
Voja actually is probably better than Ira or Indominus Rex just because it isn't so focused on the commander, right? Like it can make itself and others, exponentially bigger and faster.
Oh yeah, and it's drawing cards every turn.
To your point, that's why our group I think does play a lot of high power, is because when it comes down to it, we're looking to play commander. And in one way, what I mean by that is we're looking to do sort of fun and interesting and unique things with our decks and using them as a way to express ourselves. But still, we wanna win. We wanna try and we're still competitive, most of us, and so that's a lot big reason we lean to high power. But we're not trying to win as the only reason.
Again, the lasagna idea of bringing something to share with the group. We've set aside our Tuesday night, our Thursday night to meet up at the local game store. We've invited our friends over for Friday to talk about our lives and play some Commander. Regardless of all of the things that we do, if we set it up where I try to Door of Nothingness one person all night long, that's going to create a really frustrating experience and an awkward experience for the group. Door to Nothingness belongs in mid power, belongs in I don't know, low power almost. Is really bad, but like how I'm playing it can absolutely violate the rules. The unwritten rules of the social event that we're being a part of. Commander's not only is it not cheap, like money-wise, but it's not cheap time-wise. Like, we just don't have that many opportunities to really get together and spend time with people and do something. And when somebody decides, kind of single-handedly that, hey, I would like to make this a 4.5-hour game about me. That can make a frustrating social event. And so that's where kind of the lasagna idea, at least from what I understand, just like, hey, we're bringing this opportunity for us to spend time together and to do something together, and how you play it is every bit as important as the pieces of cardboard you're playing.
I like what you're saying, that it's how you're playing it, but a lot of that does come ahead of time, right? And how you build the deck, and then how you portray the deck, right? Because when it comes down to it, even if you have a deck list out there, nobody really knows your power level except for you. And that's actually one tiny little point about Voja that I think this could solve a lot of issues. Is a lot of times someone builds a deck with the intent for it to be mid power level, or but it ends up being, unbeknownst to them, a high power deck. And I think that happens with Voja, where all these players are putting together a bunch of elves and a bunch of wolves, and they're excited to play this cool wolf guy. Then they just end up running over their friends. That can happen one time, and I'll forgive that person. But if you then try and make an excuse and, and say, oh, this is a mid-power deck because that's how you built it, you need to understand, hey, this is actually high power and I didn't realize it.
One of my favorite commanders to play actually is Atraxa, the original one, because I turned it into a group hug deck. And so when I introduce the idea to people and I'm playing in like low power pods and whatever, they're like, "Are you sure that you know what you're doing?" And I'm like, "I'm sure I know what I'm doing. It's gonna be good." And so I start proliferating +1/+1 counters on their creatures and on loyalty counters on their planeswalkers, and people have experience counters. It's just a good old time, and I'm giving them lands and cards. So you could take a high power commander like Atraxa and turn it into a low power commander. Player choice, like John was saying earlier, digs a lot into that, because I could easily start swinging with Atraxa, but she's just there to proliferate and to block, and that's a player choice. So if you're gonna be aggressive with me, yeah, I'll block your stuff. She might die, that's fine, but I'm giving you stuff and you're attacking me. How ungrateful are you, right? Your choices, and also like you have like the cyclonic rift that would stop the player from winning, and you decide, you know what, this is their time to shine. I'm not going to take that away from them. Then you're not playing necessarily to win per se, but you're having the player experience, which takes you down to a lower power level. Yes.
Just don't tell them later.
Just don't tell them. You'll ruin the magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite thing for Commander is once you're playing the game, like do what's is best for you to win. Most of the time in the game, if you're not trying to win, then it can in some ways affect the experience of others, right? You can sort of like give the game away. Sometimes we call it king making. It's fine if you've sort of established that ahead of time. It's like, hey, we're just shooting the breeze here, as they say. We're just playing what we want to play. But if that's not the case, then you how you play it does matter as well, and in making sure that they have a good experience. But
I'm more selfish than that, and I'm choosing to withhold the interaction because I would like to move on to a different game, please. Whereas CDH, you got to play to your outs, right? You're playing to your 1% to try and pull this out.
So I sort of started off, or we talked initially about when we usually sat down to play back in the day, Commander. We didn't have power levels. You just sort of sat down and played. There has been some discussion I've heard of that people think that we'll eventually get to that point again. Do you think that we'll ever get to that point, and or should we get to that point? What are your thoughts?
Sure. When we start calling it something else, like whether it's power levels, rule 0, categories, lasagna flavors, like I think our command con that we often attend at Game Grid in Utah, they'll use like our red, yellow, green, to basically say, are you in the top 10% of competitiveness? Are you a beginner? Or everybody else just kind of fits into the yellow group, right? There's going to be some version.
Yeah, my take on it is that as long as there is a CEDH, there will always be power levels, because CEDH is DH with competitive at the front.
It's not fun to play a CEDH deck against non-CEDH decks. Like you just sit down at a table and make optimal plays with your good cards, like a turn 1 Mystic Remora that you pay for the first 2 turns, and you draw no cards because people are playing bounce lands. And I think the flip side of a scenario where you don't need power levels is like, yeah, your group might not. You're, sitting down with your friends or family members or, people that you play with regularly. Yeah, you might not talk about power level anymore. Magic is such a big game. We're getting 600 new potential commanders every year now, apparently. Yeah, we got to talk about it.
Your question about if we would ever like evolve back into no power levels, I think that answers a hard no. As the game of Magic becomes more complex, as new pieces are added, every single card is a game piece, right? I mean, if you look at it that way, there's going to be so much complexity overhaul. Voja, going from Ural to Voja, right? Just, what is that, 20 or no, 10 years difference almost? In another 10 years, there's going to be something more insane in Naya, probably. We're calling it now 10 years. This is 2024.
Probably in 2 years, yeah.
Does everyone agree that Jetmir is just better? Like, if you actually wanted to wreck people, like, Jetmir is a better commander.
Oh, the actual commander. Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that Voja is not, like, the best commander, even in the colors. It's just, it does come back to the experience, and that's why I think the conversation was interesting, and we even switched our, episode. We were going to talk about the ban list, actually, as our first episode, but this was sort of as part of the Twitter content creator zeitgeist, and I thought it would be a good one to start on because it does go into the social aspects of it, where people want to be able to do their thing, and if you don't let them do it, then they're not going to be happy. That's what it sort of comes down to. But again, it can all be solved by a good conversation, a good rule zero, and power level conversation. And to answer my question too, I don't think power levels are going anywhere. In Commander, I feel, because I play every power level pretty robustly, I feel like a peacemaker sometimes between the power levels, and in the sense of, I've seen the value and the vision of every single power level and just had a great time playing every single one of them, right? Some people might only play CDH, or they might only play low power, and I would say to either of those to try the other, and there is value and fun in each type of power level, but as long as you have that conversation and communicate with your group to make sure that you are on those similar levels, I'm down for any power level, at any time, and I have a deck for any one, and it's fun, and it really is a different experience based on that as well. But so get out of your regular, if you have a certain power level that you always play, next time you make a deck, try and make one that's more powerful or less powerful, and give it a shot, and I think you'll have a fun time.
One last plug for gameplay experiences. Like, you are asking something of other people when you bring your deck to the table, whether or not you talk about it. You're presenting an experience. I had a game at a command con, actually, where I built a 99 land Illuna, where it's a polymorph deck that's going to flip into Cultivator Colossus, draw my entire deck, and then I get to pull them all into play, and I have Valakut and Field of the Dead, and that's the deck, that's the plan, that's what I signed up for, and I thought it would be fun. I thought it would be a cool little joke, it would be a cool little meme, and man, it was pretty unpleasant for the people I was playing with. That either I sat there and did nothing, and by the time I fetched out my Dwarven Mine and created my Dwarf token to potentially mutate on, the game didn't matter, and I wasn't participating. Or I just killed the table out of nowhere, and they felt like they wasted their time with this person that just sat here and ignored everyone and played solitaire. And it was really, really instructive for me to not record that deck ever, and B, I absolutely built it on Arena and do it to people all the time. But that's because like on playing like Brawl on Arena, the ask is 5 minutes of your time. There's places to go and do that, but asking people to sacrifice 2 to 3 hours of your time for you to do a self-indulgent meme is maybe not the time for it.
Just a real quick caveat on that, but if everyone was making some weird stupid deck, then all of a sudden it turns into a great experience, right? Because everyone's trying to do their little trick, and you maybe run it back a bunch of times because you want to see the other tricks, from other people. And so it really does come down to that conversation. This is a fun first episode for the Kingdom Cast. What did you think? Let us know in the comments and give us a rating, give us a like if you liked it. And any last thoughts, gentlemen, before we close it off today?
Just be mindful of your power levels and rule 0 if you need to.
Yeah, it's a game. Have fun.
And keep
it. Dog.
Nerdy.
Awesome.
It was coming.